Hey everybody, and welcome to your next stop on your virtual farm tours. Today we are at the Wilson County Bee Farm, otherwise known as an apiary, and today we are going to get a tour of how you farm and grow bees and also what bees contribute to the food on your plate. So our tour guides for today are going to be Tommy, Magnus, and Greg, and they are going to teach you all that you need to know about honeybees.
So good afternoon. As Sarah said, my name is Tommy, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about the importance of our honeybees here in the United States. We have lots of crops that require it. A lot of our fruits and vegetables such as cucumbers, watermelons, cantaloupes, peppers, tomatoes, squash, pumpkins, a lot of those, and almost all of them, apples included, require honeybees to pollinate so we can actually get the fruit. They'll take pollen from one flower and put it on another flower, and that allows us to get fruit. Otherwise, if we did not have honeybees, the only things we'd have at grocery stores are stuff like corn, wheat, potatoes, regular white potatoes. So it's not. For lots of diversity, we do need honeybees to help us pollinate our crops. As you can see, what we're wearing are these protective suits that mainly protect our face, and that is because if we get stung, a bee will find you because it releases a scent, and that's more bees that'll come on to you. By putting these bee suits or veils on, as Greg's wearing, you can see that it protects our face so that bees don't get up in our face, because they are attracted to the CO2 that you emit when you breathe. So that's why they go straight there. And a honeybee sting to your face is very, very painful.
Alright, so what we're looking at is the queen. The way you can tell a difference is her body's longer than a worker. And we have painted a little dot on her to make her easier to find. So we kind of draw a little crown on her so we can find the queen. And her job, she's only got one job, and she is the mother of every bee in the hive. So she lays eggs all day long, and she can lay 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day. And that's her job. And she's being taken care of by the other bees, and they feed her and clean her and take care of her.
Just did. See her sticking her head down in the holes. If you watch, she sticks her head in the hole, and if it's empty, so see, she stuck her head in the hole, she's looking for empty cells, and if she finds an empty cell, then she'll lay an egg in it. See, she's looking in it, but there was something in it. So she's going to go and she looks in another one. See her looking in it? It was full. So she's going on looking for another one.
That's what she does all day and night long. Alright, so what we're looking at here is a frame of honey. So the bees make the honeycomb. They draw out the honeycomb, and it's almost like little jars that they stack together. And what they do, they collect nectar, and then they turn that into honey. They store it in these cells. And when it's ready to be stored, they put wax on top. It's kind of like when the food is ready, you put a lid on the jar and store it in your pantry. So that's what the bees have done. They've stored honey in these, and they put a lid on it with wax so that it doesn't go bad. And then in the winter, when they need it, they can take the wax off and eat it. Alright, so here we're looking at a drone, which is what the boys are called. And you can tell they're drones because their body's bigger, is rounder, and he's got really big eyes compared to his sisters. And the drones don't do much around the house, so they don't cook, they don't clean. Their job is, all they do is when they hang around at the hive, get fed, and then during the day they go out and hang around with other drones. They fly around together and they look for a girlfriend. And if they don't find one, they come home and do the same thing next day. So here we're looking at the workers. They're all girls, they're all sisters. So the hive, a big hive, can have 50,000 sisters living together. And the workers got their name because they do all the work. So they clean, they collect food, they build the wax, they defend the hive. So they do all the work in the hive. Now the drones when there's not enough food for the hive, the girls will kick them out. So they will stop feeding them and push them out the door, and they will starve to death. So it's not all good being a drone. There are some drawbacks. So the workers, we mentioned all the different jobs they have, work cleaning and protecting and collecting food. They do a different job based on how old they are. So just like how you might help your parents, you might help clean your room, and then when you get older, you might mow the yard outside. So the bees do the same thing. They have a different job depending on how old they are. So the younger bees work inside the hive. They start out, the very first thing a bee does when she emerges is to clean her room so that it's ready for the queen to lay another egg. But they do different jobs based on how old they are. Then they graduate to taking care of the babies. Then they move on to drawing wax, and one of the last jobs they do is foraging, which is collecting food, and they do that until they die. So that's their last job, and they do that until they can't do it any longer. When the bees are holding on to each other, it's kind of like making a bridge almost. It's called festooning, and other insects do the same thing. I know there are ants that do that. They'll create a bridge with and climb on their colony mates. And I know some ants will build a little raft and they'll float across the water. But bees, they do that. Part of when they do that is when they're building wax. So, but they hold on to each other and create a little bridge that other bees can climb on.
So honeybees are insects, and like a lot of insects, they go through a 4-stage metamorphosis. So they have an egg, a larva, a pupa, and an adult. And if you think about it, that's the same thing that a butterfly does. So when you see a caterpillar, the caterpillar is the same stage as the honeybee's larva. And then that caterpillar spins a cocoon and turns into a pupa. And you've all seen that, the cocoon, and then when it emerges as an adult butterfly. So the honeybees follow that same life cycle. Honeybees are not native to North America. So when the colonists first came over from England, they found the continent with no honeybees, and they were used to having honeybees where they came from. They did a lot of work for them. They made wax, obviously honey, and they pollinated their apple crops primarily. So when they got over here and found out there were no honeybees, one of the first things they brought with them in the 1620s was colonies of honeybees. Interesting thing, I guess, is they spread throughout the entire continent until they got to the Rocky Mountains. But the Rocky Mountains are too cold and too high for the honeybee to fly across, so they never colonized California and the western states until Europeans brought them around the southern tip of South America and came to California and released them on the other side of the Rocky Mountains.
What we see here on the porch of the hive, bees are just standing there facing inward the hive, and they're fanning their wings. And what it's doing is it's pulling air out of the hive and trying to pull air through the hive to help cool it off because it's a little too hot for it.
This is a smoker, and that's what we use when we're going to go into a hive. So bees, I have to backtrack a little bit. So bees communicate with pheromones, which is a type, almost like a scent. So it's a smell. So that's how the bees talk to each other. They don't have mouths like we do, or they can't bark like a dog. So they communicate with scents. And one thing a bee will do, so if a bee realizes that something is wrong, she gets hurt, or she realizes, hey, there's someone in here doing something they shouldn't, she will communicate with her sisters by scent. So by using the smoker, we cover up that scent. So it's almost like if I played really loud music in the classroom, then you couldn't talk to each other. So that's kind of how it works. It also will make them think that there's a forest fire, so they will go and start grabbing some of the honey so that they can take that with them if they have to leave. So there's multiple things that the smoke does, but it is another piece of equipment that we use to make keeping bees easier.
Bees also need to collect water. Magnus said earlier they collect nectar and pollen from flowers, but they also need water, and they use the water not only to drink but also to cool the hive with. It's kind of their air conditioning. They bring it back to the hive and put drops of water around in different places in the hive, and then fan it with their wings, and it evaporates, and that cools the hive down.
So we are here with Greg, who is the Apiary Committee Chairman for the Wilson County Apiary, where we have toured today, and we're going to ask him just a couple questions about bee farming and what he enjoys about it. So my first question for you is, what is the #1 thing you recommend to someone who wants to help honeybees?
So everybody can participate in helping honeybees, and they do need help. So the #1 thing would be to plant flowers, because honeybees have to have flowers to survive. So all of their food comes from flowers, and also the honey they make for us comes from flowers. So everybody can go out and plant a garden and it doesn't take a lot. Just a few flowers will help any of the honeybees out.
All right, well that concludes our virtual farm tour of the bee apiary. We hope that you learned something about honeybees and value them as a vital part of our farming and agriculture industry. If you registered for an activity packet, you will find these 3 worksheets in that packet. The first is identifying honeybees queen, worker, and drone as 3 different categories. So hopefully you will find some information about that in the video. You can also label the parts of the bee. And finally, you can complete this Venn diagram describing the similarities and difference between bees and ants as insects. There will also be an activity included that discusses the life cycle of the bee. All of the information that helps fill out these worksheets can be found in the video. So we hope that you enjoy your tour, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next one.